The clock on Catherine Wilson's desk read 2:13 a.m. when the doorbell rang. Not the polite chime of daytime visitors, but the insistent, desperate ring of someone who wouldn't take silence for an answer. Catherine's eyes snapped open years of late-night emergency calls from clients having trained her body to wake instantly. She reached for her robe mind, already calculating possibilities. A client in crisis, perhaps, though they usually called first. The security camera on her phone showed a hunched figure on her porch face, obscured, one hand braced against the doorframe, as if it was all that kept them standing. Catherine paused, finger hovering over the alarm button. Then the figure shifted slightly, and the porch light caught a glimpse of familiar blonde hair. Lisa. Catherine's heart plummeted as she rushed downstairs, fingers fumbling with the deadbolt. When the door swung open, the sight that greeted her would be forever burned into her memory. Her daughter, her beautiful, accomplished, vibrant daughter, stood before her like a broken doll. Lisa's left eye was swollen nearly shut, an angry purple blooming across her cheekbone. Blood had dried at the corner of her split lip, and she clutched her ribs with a protective arm. Catherine didn't need her 30 years of experience with domestic violence cases to recognize the patterns of deliberate abuse. The precise positioning of bruises where clothing would hide them. The defensive wounds on forearms. The way Lisa hunched slightly forward, suggesting injured ribs. This wasn't a fall or an accident. This was methodical. This was power and control made flesh. But when Lisa whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go," the seasoned attorney vanished, leaving only a mother whose child stood bleeding on her doorstep. Catherine guided Lisa inside with gentle hands that belied the rage building in her chest. As a professional who'd spent 3 decades fighting for women trapped in violent relationships, she knew exactly what to do. Document everything. Photograph the injuries. Secure medical attention. Build the case meticulously. But as a mother, all she wanted was to hold her daughter and promise that everything would be okay, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. In the harsh bathroom light, the full extent of Lisa's injuries became apparent. Fingerprint bruises circled her upper arms. A large contusion spread across her left rib cage, shaped suspiciously like the toe of a shoe. While cataloging each mark with her camera, Catherine's experienced eye caught something that made her breath catch a yellowing bruise on Lisa's shoulder at least a week old. This hadn't been the first time. How long has this been happening? And what other secrets was Ryan Peterson hiding behind the facade of the successful, charming son-in-law Catherine helped Lisa into a clean nightgown? Every wince from her daughter feeding the smoldering anger building within her. On the surface, she remained the calm professional, the woman who'd counseled hundreds of abuse victims, who knew that what they needed most was steady support, not emotional reactions. But beneath that composed exterior, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced since Richard died 8 years ago, a visceral, primal instinct to protect what was hers no matter the cost. The drive to Georgetown University Hospital was a blur of streetlights and silent tears, Lisa's rolling down her cheeks. Catherine's locked behind a dam of determination. In the emergency room, Dr. Elena Martinez examined Lisa with the gentle efficiency that spoke of too much experience with similar cases. 3 fractured ribs on the left side, Dr. Martinez confirmed after reviewing the x-rays, her voice clinically detached, but her eyes conveying understanding to Catherine. Significant contusions to the face and torso. No signs of internal bleeding, thankfully, but she'll be in considerable pain for several weeks. When the doctor asked what happened, Lisa hesitated, eyes darting to her mother. Catherine recognized that look she'd seen it hundreds of times from women sitting across her desk, torn between silence and truth. Between the devil they knew and the uncertainty of speaking out. Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand. "You don't have to protect him anymore." The words that tumbled out next shattered Catherine's world anew. 2 years. The abuse had been happening for 2 years. It started small criticism, controlling behavior, monitoring her whereabouts. Then came the pushing, the grabbing, the accidents. The first slap 18 months ago, followed by tearful apologies and promises to change. Promises that withered with each escalating incident. What cut deepest wasn't just the revelation of Lisa's suffering, but the realization that Catherine, who prided herself on recognizing the signs of abuse, who'd built a career helping women escape exactly this kind of situation, had missed it in her own daughter. The canceled dinners, the increasingly brief phone calls, the long sleeves in summer. All the classic signs had been there hidden in plain sight. Catherine had failed to protect the person who mattered most. As dawn broke over Arlington, they returned to Catherine's townhouse. Lisa finally succumbed to exhaustion, aided by pain medication, leaving Catherine alone with her thoughts and a determination that burned like cold fire in her veins. She moved to her home office, the room where she'd prepared countless cases, and opened her laptop. With methodical precision, she created a new folder, Lisa's Case. The first entry would be the photos from tonight, then hospital records, then a timeline of every incident Lisa could remember. Catherine wasn't just a mother seeking justice anymore. She was building a case with the same meticulous attention she'd give to any client, except this time failure wasn't an option. While researching Ryan Peterson's background, Catherine's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Tell Lisa to come home, we can work this out, she's overreacting." Catherine's hand tightened around the phone, and for a moment she wanted nothing more than to respond with the full force of her rage. But 30 years of legal experience held her back. Never communicate with the abuser. Document everything. Use the system. She took a screenshot of the message and saved it in 3 different locations. Evidence, because that's what this was now, a case. Her daughter's case. The next text made the hair on Catherine's neck stand up. "This is between husband and wife. You need to stay out of it, Catherine." The threat lay not in the words themselves, but in their implication. Ryan wasn't just reaching out to his wife. He was sending a message to his mother-in-law, the attorney. He was drawing battle lines. While Lisa slept, Catherine began building a profile of her son-in-law. Ryan Peterson, 38, founder and CEO of Peterson Development Group. His company had built several high-end residential projects across the D.C. area. He served on charitable boards, donated to political campaigns, and had been featured in the Washington Post's business section just last month. A respected pillar of the community on the surface, which made him all the more dangerous. Catherine had seen it countless times. The most devastatingly effective abusers were often those who maintained impeccable public personas. They used their social standing as both shield and weapon. Who would believe accusations against such an upstanding citizen, and even if they did, who would stand against someone with connections throughout the city's elite circles? But Catherine had spent decades learning to see through such facades. She'd taken down judges, business leaders, politicians, men who thought their power made them untouchable. She would add Ryan Peterson to that list no matter what it cost. Her mind drifted to Richard. What would he say if he could see their daughter now? Richard had never entirely warmed to Ryan, though he'd kept his reservations mostly to himself. "There's something calculated about him," he'd confided to Catherine after their first meeting. "Like he's always thinking 3 moves ahead." Catherine had dismissed it then as typical father-of-the-bride wariness. Now she wished she'd paid more attention. After Richard's sudden heart attack 8 years ago, Catherine had thrown herself into her work, partly to stay afloat financially, partly to outrun the grief. Had that left Lisa vulnerable, searching for male approval in all the wrong places? Had Catherine been so busy saving other women that she'd failed to notice her own daughter slipping away? No, Catherine pushed the thought aside. Self-recrimination wouldn't help Lisa now. Action would. She reached for the gun safe tucked in her bottom desk drawer. The Smith & Wesson that Richard had insisted she learn to use felt heavy in her hand. She hadn't touched it since his death. Catherine checked it methodically, loaded it, and placed it in her bedside drawer. She hoped she wouldn't need it, but hope wasn't a strategy. When Lisa woke mid-morning, Catherine was waiting with tea and toast, simple foods that wouldn't strain her daughter's bruised body. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I need to ask you something," Catherine finally said, keeping her voice steady. "And I need you to be completely honest with me." Lisa nodded, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated her injuries. "How many times have you sought medical attention in the past 2 years?" Lisa stared into her tea shame coloring her features. 3 times. A sprained wrist, he said, happened when I fell. Bruised ribs after he pushed me down the stairs. And a concussion when he slammed my head against the kitchen counter. Catherine's professional mask nearly cracked at the matter-of-fact way Lisa recounted these horrors. "And what did you tell the doctors? That I fell, that I was clumsy, that I tripped?" Lisa looked up hollow-eyed. "Ryan was always with me at the hospital, standing right there holding my hand, playing the concerned husband. I was too scared to say anything different." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Medical records showing a pattern of accidents over 2 years would strengthen their case immeasurably. Any competent prosecutor would recognize the pattern. "I need you to sign medical release forms," Catherine said. We need copies of all your hospital records. Lisa hesitated. Mom, if I do this, Ryan will know. He'll know I'm building a case against him. He already knows something, Catherine replied, showing her the texts. He knows you left. He knows you came to me. Right now, he's trying to figure out his next move. We need to be 3 steps ahead of him. After a moment's hesitation, Lisa nodded and signed the forms. The more Catherine learned about her son-in-law's abuse, the more calculating it appeared. Ryan had isolated Lisa, gradually criticizing her friends until she stopped seeing them. He monitored her phone and email. He controlled their finances completely, giving her an allowance, despite her full-time teaching job. All classic tactics to ensure his victim had nowhere to turn. Except Lisa had turned to her mother, a woman who had spent her entire career dismantling exactly this kind of control. By afternoon, Detective Sofia Ramirez from the Arlington Police Department called. Dr. Martinez had filed a mandatory report as required by law when treating injuries consistent with domestic violence. Mrs. Wilson, I'd like to speak with your daughter about the assault, Detective Ramirez said. Would she be willing to meet with me? Catherine put the phone on speaker. Lisa's face paled fear, replacing the dull resignation she'd worn all morning. I don't know, Lisa whispered. I'm scared. I understand, Detective Ramirez replied, her voice gentle but firm. But I want you to know we take domestic violence very seriously. I've been working these cases for 15 years. Would you at least be willing to meet with me just to talk? No pressure to file charges if you're not ready. Lisa looked at her mother, eyes wide with uncertainty. Catherine nodded encouragingly. Okay, Lisa finally agreed. I'll meet with you. While they waited for Detective Ramirez to arrive, Catherine continued building her case. She hired Marcus Webb, a retired police detective who now worked as a private investigator. Catherine had used him for several previous cases, and his thoroughness was worth every penny. I need you to follow Ryan Peterson, she instructed. Document everywhere he goes, everyone he meets. I'm particularly interested in his relationship with Stephanie Cole, his business partner. You think they're having an affair? Marcus asked. My daughter believes so, and Ryan's reaction when she confronted them suggests she's right. I need proof. While Marcus began surveillance, Catherine dove deeper into Ryan's finances. As Lisa's attorney, she could subpoena financial records as part of building a divorce case. What she discovered disturbed her deeply. Peterson Development Group appeared successful, but Ryan had been making a series of questionable financial decisions over the past year, large cash withdrawals, transfers to offshore accounts, suspicious loans. Either he was preparing for a divorce by hiding assets, or he was involved in something illegal. Possibly both. Then Catherine found something that made her blood run cold. 6 months ago, Ryan had taken out a life insurance policy on Lisa for $750,000 with himself as the sole beneficiary. The pattern suddenly crystallized with terrible clarity: life insurance, plus escalating violence, plus affair equals a husband planning his wife's accident. Ryan wasn't just abusing Lisa, he was preparing to kill her. Catherine immediately called Detective Ramirez and sent her the insurance policy documentation. Jesus, the detective breathed when she saw it. Combined with the abuse history and the affair, this could support attempted murder charges. At minimum, it shows premeditation, Catherine agreed. This wasn't just a man who lost his temper. This was calculated. That evening, Detective Ramirez arrived at Catherine's home. In her mid-40s, with alert eyes and a calm demeanor, she immediately put Lisa at ease. She asked Lisa to tell her story from the beginning, taking detailed notes without interrupting. Lisa recounted the events of the previous night. She'd returned home from a parent-teacher conference to find Ryan and his business partner Stephanie drinking wine in the living room. Stephanie was sitting unusually close to Ryan, touching his arm and laughing at everything he said. I asked if they needed anything, Lisa continued. Stephanie said something about how I should change out of my frumpy teacher clothes before my husband's business associates saw me. Ryan laughed. He actually laughed at me in front of her. Lisa had gotten upset and told Stephanie to leave. The woman refused, saying it was Ryan's house and he could have whoever he wanted there. Lisa had looked to Ryan, expecting him to back her up, but he'd sided with Stephanie, telling Lisa she was being ridiculous and embarrassing him. Lisa went to their bedroom in tears. Ryan followed, enraged. He called her pathetic and jealous, said she couldn't stand to see him successful with a real woman. When Lisa suggested Stephanie was more than just his business partner, Ryan snapped. He punched her in the face so hard she fell to the floor. When she tried to get up, he kicked her repeatedly in the ribs, saying she deserved it for not keeping her mouth shut. When he finally stopped, Ryan simply walked out, leaving Lisa bleeding on the floor. She waited until she heard his car leave, then drove to her mother's house. After hearing the full account, Detective Ramirez was frank. Cases like this are always difficult, especially when the abuser is well respected in the community. But you have several things working in your favor. You have documented injuries from the hospital. You have photographic evidence. You sought help immediately, which shows this wasn't a false accusation made out of spite. "What happens if I press charges?" Lisa asked, voice small. "We'll arrest him. He'll be arraigned, probably released on bail with a no-contact order. Then there will be a trial." The detective looked Lisa in the eye. "I won't lie to you. It will be hard. His attorney will try to discredit you to make it seem like you're lying or exaggerating. But your mother knows how this works, and she can help you through it." After Detective Ramirez left, Lisa sat quietly for a long time, staring at her hands. "I need to think about it," she finally said. Catherine understood. Filing criminal charges was a huge step that couldn't be undone. Lisa needed to be ready. But while she considered the criminal case, Catherine could begin building the civil one. The next morning, Catherine went to her law office for the first time since Lisa had appeared at her door. Her partner, Michael Harris, had been covering her cases, but she needed access to her legal research databases and case files. Catherine spent hours researching Virginia Domestic Violence Law Property Division and abuse cases and the specific judges who might be assigned to their case. She drafted a petition for a protective order under Virginia law. A victim of domestic violence could request an emergency protective order prohibiting the abuser from contacting them or coming near their residence. If granted, it would last for 72 hours, after which they could request a longer-term order. While immersed in her research, Catherine's secretary buzzed her intercom. "Mrs. Wilson, there's a man here to see you. He says it's urgent." A chill ran down Catherine's spine. "Ryan Peterson, yes. I told him you're with a client, but he insists he'll wait." Catherine considered her options. Part of her wanted to refuse to see him. But another part, the strategic attorney knew that any conversation with Ryan could provide valuable evidence. "Give me 5 minutes, then send him in," she instructed. "And Sandra, if I buzz twice, call building security immediately." Catherine used those 5 minutes to set up her phone to record. In Virginia, only one party needed to consent to recording a conversation, and she definitely consented. When Ryan walked into her office, Catherine barely recognized him. The last time she'd seen him was at a dinner 6 months ago. Then he'd been relaxed and charming, complimenting her cooking and telling jokes. Now he looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, wearing an expensive suit that was rumpled as if he'd slept in it. "Catherine." He attempted a smile. "Thank you for seeing me." "I'm busy, Ryan. What do you want him?" "I want to know where my wife is." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "Lisa is safe. That's all you need to know." His jaw tightened. "She's my wife. She belongs at home with me." "She doesn't belong to anyone," Catherine replied coldly. "Especially not to a man who put her in the hospital with 3 fractured ribs." "That was an accident," Ryan said quickly. "We had an argument. Things got out of hand. I would never intentionally hurt Lisa. You know me, Catherine. You know I love her." "I know you beat her," Catherine countered. "I've seen the photographs. I've read the hospital report. I've heard her story. That wasn't an accident, Ryan. That was assault." His expression changed then. The mask of the concerned husband slipped, and for just a moment Catherine saw what Lisa must see: cold calculation and barely controlled rage. "Are you really going to do this?" he asked, voice low. "Are you really going to destroy me over one bad night? I made a mistake, Catherine. I lost my temper. It won't happen again." "It's happened multiple times over 2 years," Catherine said evenly. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was an isolated incident." Ryan stood abruptly, leaning over her desk. "You're turning her against me, poisoning her mind. Lisa and I could work this out if you just stay out of it." "Get out of my office, Ryan." "Or what you'll call security," he laughed bitterly. "You think I'm scared of you? You think your little law degree makes you powerful? I have friends in this city. Real friends, judges, politicians, people who matter. You come after me and I will bury you and your daughter both." Catherine pressed the buzzer twice. Security arrived within a minute, 2 large men in uniforms who escorted a furious Ryan out while he shouted threats over his shoulder. As soon as he was gone, Catherine stopped the recording and immediately sent copies to 3 different locations. Then she called Detective Ramirez. "He just threatened me and my daughter in my office," she reported. "I have it recorded. How quickly can you get me an emergency protective order?" "I'm on my way to the courthouse now," Ramirez replied. "Give me an hour." While waiting, Catherine sat at her desk trying to calm her racing heart. Ryan had just shown her exactly who he was. The charm was gone. Now she'd seen the monster underneath. And that recording where he admitted to hurting Lisa, where he threatened both of them, was gold. The protective order was granted that evening. Ryan was served with papers prohibiting him from contacting Lisa or Catherine, from coming within 500 feet of Catherine's house, and from attempting any communication whatsoever. Violating the order was a criminal offense. When Catherine returned home and told Lisa, her daughter burst into tears. "What if this makes him angrier?" she asked. "What if he finds a way around it?" "Then he goes to jail," Catherine said firmly. "Lisa, I know this is terrifying, but we're building walls around you. Legal walls. Every document we file, every piece of evidence we gather, every witness we interview, it's all protection." Lisa looked up, wiping her eyes. "Do you really think we can win against Ryan?" Catherine sat beside her daughter, taking her hands. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I've never lost a domestic violence case. I know how men like Ryan operate. They count on fear and shame to keep their victims silent. But you're not silent anymore. You've already taken the hardest step by asking for help." Over the next days, Catherine worked tirelessly. She subpoenaed Lisa's medical records from all 3 hospital visits. She interviewed Lisa's colleagues, 2 of whom confirmed seeing bruises on Lisa's arms and noticing her becoming increasingly withdrawn over the past year. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb reported back with damning evidence. "Peterson is definitely having an affair with Stephanie Cole." He confirmed providing photos of them together at restaurants, at her apartment at a hotel in Bethesda. "Very cozy, very intimate." "There's something else," Marcus continued. "Last night, Peterson met with a man named Vincent Russo. He's a loan shark, works out of Baltimore, known for lending to people who can't get legitimate loans. They met at a warehouse in Northeast D.C. The conversation looked heated. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Russo was definitely threatening him." "So Ryan's in debt to a loan shark," Catherine mused. "That explains some of the suspicious finances. He's desperate for money." "Desperate enough to kill his wife for insurance money," Marcus agreed grimly. Everything was falling into place: the affair, the debt, the life insurance policy, the escalating violence. Ryan Peterson was a man with his back against the wall, willing to do anything to solve his problems, including murder. A week after Lisa had arrived at her door, Catherine was working in her home office when her security camera alert chimed. Ryan was standing on her front porch, directly violating the protective order. Catherine immediately called 911, then Detective Ramirez. While waiting for the police to arrive, she watched Ryan on the camera feed. He rang the doorbell repeatedly, then began pounding on the door. "Lisa," he shouted. "Lisa, I know you're in there. You need to come home. We can work this out." Lisa emerged from her room, face white with terror. "Mom, what do we do?" "We stay inside," Catherine said firmly. "The police are on their way. He can't get to you. The doors are locked. The security system is on. You're safe." But Ryan wasn't giving up. He pounded harder, his voice growing more desperate. "Lisa, please just talk to me. Your mother is filling your head with lies. I love you. I would never hurt you on purpose." It was an accident. Catherine recorded everything on her phone, every word he shouted, every moment he violated the court order. 5 minutes later, police cars arrived. 2 officers approached Ryan, and Catherine watched as they informed him he was under arrest for violating the protective order. Despite his protests, they handcuffed him and placed him in the patrol car. After they left, Lisa collapsed on the couch, shaking. "He found us. He knows where we are. And now he's in jail for violating a court order," Catherine pointed out. "Lisa, this is actually good for us. It shows a judge that he's dangerous, that he can't be trusted to follow the law. Every time he does something like this, he makes our case stronger." But that night, Catherine double-checked all the locks, ensured the security system was armed, and kept her gun close. Men like Ryan became even more dangerous when they started to lose control, when their carefully constructed worlds began to crumble. And Ryan Peterson was definitely losing control. Ryan spent 48 hours in jail before his attorney Andrew Bennett got him released on bail. The conditions were strict. He had to surrender his passport, wear an ankle monitor, stay at least 1,000 feet from Lisa or Catherine, and have absolutely no contact. The morning after his release, Catherine received a call from Bennett. "Mrs. Wilson, I think we should talk," he said, voice smooth and professional. "Perhaps we can resolve this matter without going through a lengthy, expensive trial that will be painful for everyone involved." "I'm listening," Catherine replied, though she already knew what was coming. "My client is willing to grant your daughter a generous divorce settlement. He'll give her the house, her car, $200,000 in cash, and cover all legal fees. In exchange, she drops the criminal charges and signs a non-disclosure agreement." Catherine actually laughed. "Your client put my daughter in the hospital with 3 fractured ribs, has been systematically abusing her for 2 years, took out a $750,000 life insurance policy on her, and is having an affair with his business partner. And you think $200,000 and a house will make this go away?" Bennett was quiet for a moment. "What do you want, men?" "I want your client to plead guilty to felony domestic assault. I want him to serve significant prison time. I want my daughter to get everything: the house, his business assets, his retirement accounts. And I want Stephanie Cole to testify about the affair and her knowledge of the abuse." "That's not going to happen," Bennett said flatly. "Then I'll see you in court." After hanging up, Lisa asked nervously, "Do you really think we can win? Ryan has so much money. He can afford the best lawyers." "Money doesn't win cases," Catherine told her. "Evidence does, and we have all the evidence we need." 2 weeks later, they had their preliminary hearing where the judge would determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial on the criminal charges. The courtroom was packed. Catherine sat in the front row with Lisa, who was trembling despite trying to appear composed. Across the aisle, Ryan sat with Bennett, looking confident in an expensive suit. Detective Ramirez testified first, methodically walking through the evidence, the hospital records, photographs of Lisa's injuries, threatening text messages, the violated protective order. Then Dr. Martinez took the stand, describing Lisa's injuries in clinical detail. 3 fractured ribs on the left side, consistent with being kicked by an adult male. Facial contusions, consistent with being struck with a closed fist. Multiple bruises on the arms and wrists, consistent with being grabbed forcefully. Bennett tried to suggest Lisa's injuries could have resulted from a fall, but Dr. Martinez shut him down. "In my 15 years as an emergency room physician, I've treated hundreds of domestic violence victims. These were not from a fall. These were from being beaten." When it was Lisa's turn to testify, Catherine squeezed her hand before she took the stand. Lisa was terrified. It was evident in every line of her body, but when she began speaking, her voice was steady. She recounted that night Ryan's anger when she questioned his relationship with Stephanie, the first punch that knocked her down, the kicks that followed her desperate drive to her mother's house. "Did you provoke your husband?" Bennett asked during cross-examination. "I asked his mistress to leave my home," Lisa replied evenly. "If that's provocation, then yes, I provoked him." "Isn't it true that you have a history of jealousy and insecurity in your marriage?" Lisa's eyes flashed with unexpected fire. "Isn't it true that my husband was having an affair and beating me? Which seems like the bigger problem to you?" Catherine felt a surge of pride. Her daughter was finding her voice. Then came the moment Catherine had been waiting for. Stephanie Cole took the stand. She looked nervous, hands clasped tightly in her lap, but her testimony was devastating for Ryan. "Ryan and I have been having an affair for 8 months, she admitted. "He told me his marriage was over, that Lisa knew about us. But that night when Lisa came home and found us together, I realized he'd been lying. The look on her face, she had no idea." "What happened after Lisa went to the bedroom?" the prosecutor asked. "Ryan followed her. I heard shouting, then sounds like someone being hit, and Lisa crying and begging him to stop." Stephanie's voice broke. "I should have done something, but I was scared. I just sat there. After the assault, Ryan came back out like nothing had happened. He said Lisa was being dramatic, that she'd calm down. Then he suggested we go to a hotel. I left. I couldn't stay there knowing what he'd just done." "Have you seen signs of violent behavior from Mr. Peterson at other times?" Stephanie nodded. "He has a terrible temper. He's thrown things, broken furniture. Once he grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises because I was late to a meeting. I'm afraid of him." Bennett tried to discredit her during cross-examination, suggesting she was testifying out of spite because Ryan had ended their affair. "He didn't end it," Stephanie said firmly. "I did because I realized I was dating a man who beats women, and I didn't want to be his next victim." After 2 days of testimony, Judge Patricia Morrison ruled there was more than sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Ryan would face charges of felony domestic assault, felony assault causing serious injury and violating a protective order. Given the severity of the charges and the defendant's previous violation of a protective order, I'm remanding Mr. Peterson to custody without bail pending trial, Judge Morrison declared. Ryan's face went white. Bennett immediately objected, but the judge was unmoved. Your client has shown he cannot be trusted to follow court orders, Mr. Bennett. He will remain in custody. Trial is set for 8 weeks from today. As they led Ryan away in handcuffs, he turned and looked at Lisa. The expression on his face was pure hatred. Lisa grabbed Catherine's hand and Catherine held it tight. It's almost over, she whispered. Just a little longer. But Catherine knew the real battle was just beginning. The preliminary hearing had been relatively straightforward. They'd only needed to show probable cause. The trial would be far more intense with Ryan's freedom at stake. Bennett would pull out all stops, attack Lisa's credibility, paint her as unstable, jealous, vindictive. Still, as Catherine looked at her daughter, sitting straighter now, a quiet determination replacing the fear in her eyes, she felt a flicker of hope. They had evidence. They had witnesses. They had truth on their side. And most importantly, they had each other. For the first time since that terrible night, Catherine allowed herself to believe that they might actually win this fight. That Lisa might finally be free. That the monster who had stolen her daughter's light might actually face justice. And if there was one thing Catherine Wilson had learned in 30 years of fighting for abused women, it was this. Justice wasn't just a word in a law book, it was freedom worth fighting for, no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how long the battle. The 8 weeks before the trial stretched before Catherine like a battlefield waiting to be conquered. Each day required strategic planning, meticulous preparation, and the careful management of her most precious resource, her daughter's fragile strength. Catherine converted her dining room into a war room, with timelines, evidence folders, and legal precedents covering every surface. The space between mother and daughter, once filled with casual conversations about school events and neighborhood gossip, now overflowed with legal terminology and trial strategy. 72 hours until our first pre-trial motion, Catherine noted, marking the calendar with a red X. She'd instituted a countdown system, a way to break the overwhelming 8-week wait into manageable segments. Small victories to sustain them through the marathon ahead. For Lisa, each passing day brought a physical healing that stood in stark contrast to her psychological wounds. The visible bruises faded from purple to yellow to nothing, while the invisible damage remained raw and undiminished. She flinched at unexpected sounds, startled when doors closed too forcefully, checked the security camera feed compulsively. Behaviors Catherine recognized from countless clients, the hypervigilance of someone whose sense of safety had been shattered. Dr. Alicia Williams, the trauma psychologist Catherine had recommended, worked with Lisa twice weekly. Recovery isn't linear, she reminded them both during a joint session. There will be good days and setbacks. The goal isn't to forget what happened, but to integrate it into your life story without letting it define you. Words that sounded wise and hollow, simultaneously easy for someone who hadn't felt a husband's fist against their face to say. But Catherine held her tongue. She'd seen enough survivors emerge from trauma's shadow to know the psychologist was right, even when the path forward seemed impossibly steep. Catherine's law partner, Michael Harris, had taken over most of her caseload without complaint, allowing her to focus almost exclusively on Lisa's case. At 58, with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on his nose, Michael had been Catherine's professional other half since they'd opened their practice together shortly after law school. He'd been Richard's closest friend and had stepped in as a surrogate uncle to Lisa after his death. The Peterson Development Group's financials finally arrived, Michael announced, dropping a thick folder on Catherine's desk 3 weeks before the trial. You were right to dig deeper. Their last 3 projects are underwater, and there's a pattern of funds being siphoned to a shell company in the Caymans. Catherine flipped through the documents, each page reinforcing what she'd already suspected. Ryan's company is a house of cards. He's been presenting an image of success while secretly bleeding money, which gives him an even stronger motive to cash in that life insurance policy. Michael agreed, his usual jovial expression replaced by grim understanding. Did your investigator ever determine how much he owes that loan shark? Marcus thinks it's north of $300,000. Ryan's been using money from new investors to pay off old debts, a classic Ponzi scheme that was about to collapse. A financial time bomb ticking alongside the escalating abuse. If Catherine needed further confirmation that Ryan had been planning Lisa's accidental death, the evidence was now overwhelming. Marcus Webb continued his surveillance of Ryan's business partner and paramour Stephanie Cole. The woman had become a nervous wreck since agreeing to testify, alternating between determination and panic. Twice she'd called Catherine in tears, ready to withdraw her testimony only to recommit hours later. A wobbly alliance at best, but a necessary one. Catherine decided a face-to-face meeting was needed. She arranged to meet Stephanie at a quiet cafe in Georgetown, far from the business districts where she might encounter mutual acquaintances of Ryan's. Stephanie arrived wearing oversized sunglasses. Despite the cloudy day, her shoulders hunched beneath an expensive cashmere sweater. She glanced around the cafe with nervous energy before sliding into the booth opposite Catherine. "I'm being followed." The words tumbled out before Catherine could even greet her. "Someone's been parked outside my apartment building. Last night I heard footsteps behind me in the parking garage." Catherine didn't dismiss the younger woman's fears. "Have you reported it to Detective Ramirez?" "What would I say that I feel someone watching me? They'd think I'm paranoid." Stephanie removed her sunglasses, revealing shadows beneath bloodshot eyes. "Maybe I am. I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since the preliminary hearing." The fear was genuine, Catherine could see. Whether the threat was real or perceived almost didn't matter. The effect was the same. A witness too frightened might become unreliable on the stand. "I'll arrange for private security to escort you for the next 3 weeks. Catherine's tone brooked no argument. "And I'd like you to consider staying at a hotel under a different name as we get closer to the trial date." "I can't afford—" "It's covered. Your testimony is critical, Stephanie. Without you, it becomes Lisa's word against Ryan's." Stephanie wrapped trembling fingers around her coffee cup. "I didn't know what he was doing to her. I swear I didn't know." "But you suspected something wasn't right," Catherine pressed gently. "You saw his temper, experienced his controlling behavior yourself. He could be so charming, though. That's the thing no one understands." Stephanie's eyes took on a faraway look. "When Ryan focuses his attention on you, it's like being bathed in sunlight. You feel special, chosen. It's only later you realize it wasn't sunlight at all. It was a spotlight designed to blind you to everything else." Words that echoed what Lisa had said about the early days of her relationship with Ryan. The same intoxicating attention, the same gradual isolation, the same progressive control. Different women, same predatory pattern. "That's exactly what the jury needs to hear from you," Catherine said. "Not just what happened that night, but the context how Ryan operates, how he manipulates those around him." Stephanie nodded slowly, something like resolve steadying her hands. "I'll testify, but afterwards I need to leave D.C. Start over somewhere he can't find me." A request Catherine understood all too well. How many clients had she helped relocate over the years? How many women had been forced to abandon careers, homes, friends, everything familiar, simply to ensure their safety from the men who claimed to love them? "I have contacts in Seattle who can help you find work," Catherine promised. "After the trial, we'll make it happen." The security of one witness addressed Catherine turned her attention to another front, preparing Lisa for the ordeal of testifying. They spent hours in mock cross-examinations with Catherine playing the role of defense attorney Andrew Bennett, asking the brutal questions Lisa would face on the stand. "You've struggled with anxiety and depression in the past, isn't that right, Mrs. Peterson?" Catherine adopted Bennett's smooth, slightly condescending tone. Lisa straightened her shoulders, meeting her mother's gaze steadily. "I sought therapy during college for anxiety, yes, like millions of Americans. And you take medication for these conditions." "I take a prescribed antidepressant which actually helps me think more clearly, not less." "Couldn't your mental health issues be affecting your perception of events in your marriage?" "Creating paranoia, perhaps." Lisa didn't flinch. "Bruises aren't a perception issue, Mr. Bennett. Neither are broken ribs or medical records spanning 2 years. With each practice session, Lisa grew steadier, more confident in her responses. The woman who had collapsed on Catherine's doorstep was finding her voice, reclaiming her narrative word by word, question by question. 4 weeks before trial, Marcus Webb brought news that changed the complexion of their case entirely. "I finally tracked down Ryan's ex-girlfriend from before Lisa," the investigator reported, sliding a folder across Catherine's desk. "Heather Johnston lived with him for 2 years before suddenly moving to Chicago in 2014. Catherine opened the file to find police reports, hospital records, and photographs documenting a pattern of abuse disturbingly similar to Lisa's experience. He did the same thing to her. Almost identical progression. Started with emotional abuse, escalated to pushing and grabbing, culminated in her being hospitalized with a broken arm and cracked ribs. She filed charges, but then suddenly withdrew them and left town. He paid her off, Catherine concluded. $200,000 according to bank records I obtained. Marcus tapped the file. Sound familiar? The exact amount Ryan had offered Lisa through his attorney. A pattern established. Not a heat-of-the-moment mistake, as Bennett would try to claim, but a calculated cycle of abuse with a predetermined escape route when things went too far. Can we get her to testify? Marcus shook his head. She signed an NDA as part of the settlement. However, in Virginia, the judge can override that if there's a compelling public interest, like preventing future violence. A legal battle within the legal battle, but one worth fighting. Catherine immediately filed a motion to compel Heather Johnston's testimony, arguing that the NDA was against public policy when used to conceal violent criminal behavior. While the legal machinery ground forward, Lisa took a tentative step toward reclaiming her life by returning to her elementary school to visit colleagues. Catherine had initially objected Ryan might have friends watching the school, but Lisa had been adamant. I can't stay hidden forever. Teaching is the one part of my life he didn't completely control. Catherine arranged for a private security officer to accompany Lisa, watching from a distance, as her daughter was embraced by fellow teachers who had noticed her extended absence. The visit lasted only an hour, but Lisa returned with a hint of color in her cheeks and a lightness in her step that had been absent for weeks. My principal wants me back whenever I'm ready, she reported, a spark of her old self showing through the trauma's shroud. He's holding my position open. Small victories. Stepping stones across treacherous waters. 3 weeks before the trial, Andrew Bennett filed a motion to exclude the life insurance policy evidence, arguing it was prejudicial and not directly relevant to the assault charges. Catherine spent 2 days crafting the counter-motion, citing precedents where evidence of financial motivation had been allowed in domestic violence cases. Judge Morrison ruled in their favor. The jury would hear about the life insurance policy. One battle won in the larger war. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Jason Rodriguez, worked closely with Catherine, recognizing her unique position as both victim's advocate and expert in domestic violence law. Together, they constructed a narrative that would help the jury understand not just what Ryan had done, but the calculated nature of his abuse. We need to address the "why didn't she leave" question before Bennett even asks it, Rodriguez noted during a strategy session. At 35, he was younger than Catherine had expected, but his reputation for handling complex cases was well earned. I've prepared a timeline showing the progression of control, Catherine replied. Financial isolation, monitoring her communications, systematically separating her from support networks. Classic abuser tactics that create invisible cages. Rodriguez nodded. Good. We'll have Dr. Williams testify about trauma bonding and the psychological barriers to leaving abusive relationships. Then Lisa can walk us through her specific experience. A comprehensive approach that would leave Bennett few openings to exploit. Still, Catherine knew from experience that domestic violence cases were never straightforward. Juries brought their own biases and misconceptions to the courtroom, often unconsciously blaming victims for their own abuse. 2 weeks before the trial, their carefully constructed case faced its first serious threat. Bennett filed a motion claiming Lisa had a history of false accusations, citing a college incident where she had reported a professor for sexual harassment, but later withdrew the complaint. This is character assassination, Catherine fumed, pacing Rodriguez's office. That case was 15 years ago, and she withdrew it because the university pressured her, not because her claims weren't valid. I agree, Rodriguez said, but Bennett's painting a picture of a woman who cries wolf. We need to address it directly rather than avoiding it. They decided Lisa would acknowledge the incident if questioned, explaining how the university had made it clear pursuing the complaint would damage her academic standing. A formative experience that had actually made her more reluctant to report Ryan's abuse, fearing she wouldn't be believed again. Turning potential weaknesses into strengths, a strategy Catherine had employed countless times throughout her career. The skeleton in Lisa's closet becoming another brick in the wall of their case. 10 days before the trial, Catherine received a text from an unknown number. Drop the charges or everyone sees what kind of wife Lisa really is. Minutes later, a video arrived showing Lisa drinking at a company Christmas party, laughing as she danced with a male colleague. Innocent behavior, but filmed from an angle and cut in a way that suggested impropriety. Catherine immediately contacted Detective Ramirez, who traced the message to a burner phone purchased with cash. Untraceable, but the timing made Ryan the obvious suspect using an intermediary since he was prohibited from contact. He's getting desperate, Ramirez observed. This attempt at intimidation actually strengthens our case. But Catherine worried about the psychological impact on Lisa, who became physically ill after viewing the doctored video. He's still controlling the narrative, Lisa whispered that night, curled into herself on the guest bed that had become her sanctuary. Even from jail, he's finding ways to hurt me. The realization that Ryan's reach extended beyond his physical confinement sent Lisa spiraling. She missed her next therapy appointment, refused food, and spoke of dropping the charges just to make it stop. Catherine recognized the crisis point the moment many victims retreated back into the false safety of compliance. She called Dr. Williams, who made an emergency house call. "This is exactly what Ryan wants," the psychologist told Lisa gently. "He's counting on your fear overriding your determination. Each time you stand firm, you reclaim a piece of yourself he tried to destroy." Lisa looked up, eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then let's use that," Catherine suggested. "Not the fear itself, but your exhaustion with it. You're tired of living under his shadow. The only way out isn't backward. It's forward through the trial, through the truth to the other side." Something shifted in Lisa's expression, not quite resolve, but its precursor. The recognition that there was no safe retreat, only the possibility of advancement. 1 week before trial, Catherine faced her own crisis of faith. Alone in her office after midnight, surrounded by case files and legal precedents, the weight of responsibility threatened to crush her. What if she'd missed something? What if Bennett had a surprise witness, an angle she hadn't anticipated? What if after everything they lost, the consequences of failure weren't just legal, but potentially fatal? If Ryan walked free, Lisa would never be safe again. Catherine knew the statistics too well. The most dangerous time for an abuse victim was after they left, especially if the abuser faced consequences and was then released. She found herself opening her desk drawer, touching the photo she kept there, Richard on their wedding day, smiling with unguarded joy. "I need your strength now," she whispered to the empty room. "I need to know I'm doing the right thing, pushing this forward instead of getting Lisa somewhere far away from here." No answer came, of course. Just the hollow silence of her office and the distant sound of traffic below. Yet the moment of vulnerability served its purpose, allowing Catherine to acknowledge her fears before setting them aside. Doubts couldn't be eliminated, but they could be managed, channeled into more thorough preparation. 5 days before trial, Marcus Webb brought news that solidified their understanding of Ryan's financial desperation. He'd uncovered a second mortgage Ryan had taken out on the house he shared with Lisa, a $400,000 loan obtained 6 months earlier, without Lisa's knowledge or consent, using forged signatures on the paperwork. "The money went straight to an offshore account," Marcus reported. "Then most of it came back through a series of transfers to Vincent Russo, the loan shark." Catherine immediately added mortgage fraud to the growing list of Ryan's crimes. The discovery also explained why Ryan had offered Lisa the house in the settlement. It was practically worthless to him, mortgaged beyond its value. 3 days before trial, Bennett made one final attempt to break their resolve. He called Catherine with a new offer. Ryan would plead guilty to a reduced charge of simple assault, serve 6 months in county jail, and grant Lisa an uncontested divorce with a $300,000 settlement. "He's scared," Catherine realized after hanging up. "He knows we have him." The plea offer represented both an opportunity and a dilemma. 6 months was nothing compared to the years Ryan deserved, but it guaranteed some punishment without the risks of trial. Catherine presented the option to Lisa without recommendation, respecting her daughter's agency to make this crucial decision. Lisa took 24 hours to consider consulting with Dr. Williams and sitting alone in Catherine's back garden, where spring flowers were beginning to emerge from winter's retreat. When she finally delivered her answer, her voice held a certainty Catherine hadn't heard in months. "No deals. I want the jury to hear what he did. I want it on record." Lisa's hands were steady as she poured her morning coffee. "Not just for me, but for Heather Johnston, for Stephanie, for anyone else he might hurt if he gets another chance." A decision that carried risk but also integrity. Catherine notified Rodriguez, who seemed unsurprised. "Most victims settle to avoid the trauma of testifying," he observed. "Your daughter is exceptionally brave." Brave, yes, but still vulnerable. As the trial date approached, Lisa's nightmares intensified. Twice, Catherine found her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., unable to sleep, methodically organizing and reorganizing her teaching materials, as though preparing to return to a classroom she might never see again. The day before the trial, Catherine secured a private meeting with Judge Morrison to address security concerns. Ryan's connections in the business community had rallied around him, with several prominent developers attending the preliminary hearing in a show of support. Catherine worried about intimidation tactics in the courtroom. "I'll have additional security present," Morrison assured her. "And I've already decided to prohibit any demonstrations of support or opposition from the gallery. No buttons, no signs, no coordinated clothing colors. This courtroom will maintain complete neutrality." A small comfort, but meaningful. Judge Morrison's reputation for running a controlled courtroom was well known, and Catherine felt confident she wouldn't allow Bennett's theatrics or Ryan's supporters to influence the proceedings. That evening, Catherine and Lisa shared a quiet dinner at home, neither mentioning the trial that would begin in less than 14 hours. Instead, they talked about Lisa's students, about the garden that needed attention, about a film they'd both loved years ago. Normal conversations that felt like luxury items after weeks of legal strategizing. As they cleared the dishes, Lisa paused, one hand resting on the counter. "Do you remember teaching me to ride a bike? How I was so scared of falling that I refused to let you take off the training wheels." Catherine smiled at the unexpected memory. "You were 7. So stubborn about it. You finally made a deal with me. You said you'd hold on to the back of the seat, and if I felt myself falling, I could just put my feet down." Lisa's expression softened with the recollection. "So I agreed, and I rode that bike all the way down the block, so proud of myself for being brave." "I remember. It wasn't until I got back that I realized you'd let go after the first few feet. I'd been riding on my own the whole time." Lisa looked up, meeting her mother's eyes. "That's what this feels like. I'm terrified, but I know you're right behind me. And maybe I've been riding on my own for a while now, even when I thought I couldn't." Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion. "You've always been stronger than you knew." "Not always," Lisa countered. "But I'm learning." The morning of the trial dawned clear in cold sunlight, casting long shadows across Arlington's courthouse steps. Catherine had chosen Lisa's outfit carefully, a navy blue dress with a subtle pattern, professional, but not severe, conveying both dignity and approachability to the jury. Catherine herself wore the charcoal gray suit that had seen her through hundreds of court appearances, her own armor for the battle ahead. They arrived early to avoid the press that had gathered, entering through a secure side entrance arranged by Detective Ramirez. The courtroom waited empty and expectant, its wooden benches and polished railings silent witnesses to countless human dramas that had unfolded within its walls. Lisa ran her hand along the smooth wooden railing separating the gallery from the proceedings. "It's smaller than I imagined." "Most are," Catherine replied, guiding her daughter to their seats behind the prosecution table. "Television always makes courtrooms look grand and imposing. The reality is more human-scaled." Rodriguez joined them, reviewing last-minute details in preparation for the jury selection process that would occupy most of the morning. Lisa would be asked to leave during this phase, as her presence might influence potential jurors before testimony began. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Morrison entered in her black robes, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp features and penetrating gaze. "Docket number 2023 CR 7425, Commonwealth of Virginia versus Ryan Peterson," she announced. "Are both sides prepared to proceed?" Rodriguez and Bennett confirmed they were ready. Lisa was escorted to a private waiting room, and the lengthy process of jury selection began. Catherine observed each potential juror, intently noting their reactions to questions about domestic violence, their body language when discussing marital relationships, any hint of bias that might harm their case. Bennett predictably sought jurors who expressed traditional views on marriage and family, who believed in handling private matters within the home. By late afternoon, they had seated 12 jurors and 2 alternates, 8 women and 6 men, ranging in age from 26 to 71. A diverse group that Catherine felt cautiously optimistic about, particularly the older women who had nodded subtly when Rodriguez discussed the complex reasons victims might stay in abusive relationships. Opening statements would begin the following morning. As they left the courthouse, Catherine noticed a group of men in expensive suits watching from across the street, Ryan's business associates. No doubt their presence a silent message of support for him and intimidation for Lisa. Catherine steered her daughter toward their car, maintaining a protective arm around her shoulders. "Don't look at them. They're just trying to rattle you." "I know," Lisa said, surprising Catherine with the steadiness in her voice. "But I'm done being rattled by men in suits who think their money makes them untouchable." That night, as final preparations for the next day's testimony consumed them, Catherine received an unexpected call from Heather Johnston Ryan's ex-girlfriend from Chicago. "Your investigator found me," the woman said without preamble. "I heard you're trying to get my testimony." "We are," Catherine confirmed. "The judge is still considering whether to override your NDA. I've been watching the news. I saw her Lisa going into the courthouse today." Heather's voice caught slightly. "She looks like I felt 6 years ago. Scared but determined." "That's an accurate assessment." A long pause filled the line before Heather spoke again. "I don't need the judge to override anything. I'm coming to testify." Catherine sat up straighter. "That's a significant decision. Ryan's attorneys will argue you're in violation of the NDA. They could sue for the return of the settlement money." "Let them try," Heather replied, a newfound strength evident in her tone. "I've spent 6 years looking over my shoulder wondering if he'd find me, if he'd make good on his threats, if I ever spoke about what he did. I'm done living like that." "When can you be here?" "I'm at the airport now. Flight lands at Reagan at 10:30 tonight." Catherine immediately texted Rodriguez with the update, then arranged for Marcus to meet Heather at the airport and bring her to a secure hotel. One more witness. One more voice to corroborate the pattern of abuse that defined Ryan Peterson's treatment of women. As midnight approached, Catherine found Lisa sitting in the darkened living room, staring out at the streetlights that dotted their quiet neighborhood. "You should try to sleep," Catherine suggested gently. "Tomorrow will be intense." Lisa nodded but didn't move. "I keep thinking about who I was before all this. Before Ryan. I had plans, dreams, confidence. Somewhere along the way, I lost the thread of myself." "You can find it again," Catherine said, settling beside her daughter on the couch. "Many of my clients have rebuilt their lives after experiences like yours. Different perhaps, but often stronger for having survived." "That's what everyone says. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger." Lisa's smile held no humor. "But sometimes what doesn't kill you just leaves you broken in places no one can see." Catherine couldn't offer platitudes in the face of such raw honesty. "Maybe both can be true. Maybe being broken and being strong aren't mutually exclusive." They sat together in companionable silence until Lisa finally stood, stretching tired muscles. "I should try to sleep. The prosecutor needs me coherent tomorrow." "Lisa," Catherine called softly as her daughter reached the stairs. "Whatever happens in that courtroom, I want you to know something. Testimony isn't just about securing a conviction. It's about reclaiming your story from someone who tried to silence you. Whatever the verdict, your truth matters. It changes things." Lisa paused, one hand on the banister. "I hope you're right. In 30 years, I've never been more certain of anything." As Lisa disappeared upstairs, Catherine remained in the darkened living room, mentally reviewing every detail of the case one final time. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin, not just for justice, but for her daughter's future, and for every woman Ryan Peterson might target if they failed. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on Catherine's shoulders like a physical burden, but alongside it burned a fierce determination that had defined her professional life and now consumed her personal one. The unwavering belief that no one was above accountability, that power and privilege couldn't shield perpetrators forever. That truth properly presented still held the power to bring down even the most protected predators. Tomorrow, that belief would be put to its most critical test. In her bedroom, Catherine checked her phone one last time before attempting sleep. A text from Marcus confirmed that Heather Johnston had arrived safely and was settled in her hotel. Another message from Rodriguez outlined minor adjustments to the witness order based on this new development. Catherine set her alarm for 5:10 a.m., allowing ample time to prepare both herself and Lisa for the day ahead. Then she placed her phone on the nightstand beside the framed photograph of Richard and a much younger Lisa at her college graduation. The two people she had loved most in the world, one lost forever, the other fighting to reclaim her life from the man who had nearly destroyed it. As sleep finally claimed her, Catherine's last conscious thought was not of legal strategies or witness preparation, but of Lisa's words about riding a bicycle, about the moment of discovery that she had been traveling on her own strength all along, even when she believed she couldn't. Perhaps that was the real victory waiting at the end of this ordeal, not just Ryan's punishment, but Lisa's rediscovery of her own resilience. The truth that had guided Catherine through 3 decades of advocating for abuse survivors' justice wasn't just about what happened in a courtroom. It was about what happened within the hearts of those who had been wronged, their journey from victim to survivor, from silence to voice, from powerlessness to agency. Tomorrow, that journey would continue under the harsh lights of Courtroom 3B, with 12 strangers bearing witness to the most painful chapter of Lisa's life. But today, in the quiet darkness of Catherine's home, the first fragile tendrils of healing had already begun to take root. The morning of opening statements, Catherine woke before her alarm, the weight of the coming day already pressing on her consciousness. She found Lisa in the kitchen, dressed and nursing a cup of tea, her hair still damp from the shower. "I couldn't sleep past 4, Lisa admitted, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him watching me from across the courtroom." Catherine squeezed her daughter's shoulder gently. "He can watch all he wants. He can't touch you anymore." "Can't he, though?" Lisa's voice carried an edge Catherine hadn't heard before. "Isn't that what this whole process is, him touching my life, forcing me to relive every moment of pain he caused, making me justify why I stayed, why I left, why I'm overreacting?" The bitter truth hung between them, impossible to deny. The justice system, for all its noble intentions, often re-traumatized victims in its pursuit of accountability. Catherine had guided countless women through this gauntlet, but experiencing it from a mother's perspective revealed fresh cruelties she'd never fully appreciated. "The system is imperfect," Catherine acknowledged, "but it's what we have, and I've seen it work, Lisa. I've seen women walk out of courtrooms taller than when they entered, not because a verdict validated them, but because they reclaimed their voices in a public forum where no one could silence them." They arrived at the courthouse through a side entrance, again navigating past a growing crowd of reporters, drawn by the high-profile nature of the case. Ryan Peterson's business success had made him a minor celebrity in D.C. financial circles, and his arrest had fueled weeks of speculative coverage. Inside Courtroom 3B, the gallery was already filling. Catherine noted the strategic positioning of Ryan's supporters, business associates, and country club friends, occupying the front row directly behind the defense table, presenting a united front of respectability. On the prosecution side sat Lisa's teaching colleagues, Detective Ramirez, Dr. Williams, and several of Catherine's longtime professional associates who had come to show support. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the bailiff's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "All rise. The Circuit Court of Arlington County is now in session, the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding." Judge Morrison entered with measured steps, her expression giving away nothing as she surveyed the packed courtroom. "Be seated. Commonwealth v. Peterson case number 2023, CR 7425. Our counsel prepared to deliver opening statements." Assistant District Attorney Jason Rodriguez rose first, buttoning his suit jacket with a practiced motion. "The Commonwealth is ready, Your Honor." Andrew Bennett followed suit. "Defense is prepared, Your Honor." "Mr. Rodriguez, you may proceed." The prosecutor moved to stand before the jury box, his presence commanding without being imposing. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about power and control disguised as love. Over the next several days, you will hear evidence that the defendant Ryan Peterson systematically abused his wife Lisa Peterson over a 2-year period, culminating in a vicious assault that left her with 3 fractured ribs, facial contusions, and multiple other injuries." Rodriguez walked them methodically through the narrative, the escalating pattern of abuse, the financial control, the isolation, the final brutal attack when Lisa confronted Ryan about his affair. He introduced the insurance policy, the financial troubles, the previous victim. A comprehensive picture of a man who didn't simply lose his temper, but one who had calculated every aspect of his relationship with brutal precision. "The evidence will show that this was not an isolated incident," Rodriguez concluded. "This was the predictable culmination of a campaign of terror waged behind closed doors by a man who presented himself as a pillar of the community while systematically destroying his wife's sense of self and safety. We ask you to hold him accountable, not just for his actions on the night in question, but for the calculated pattern of abuse that preceded it." Bennett's opening offered the counter-narrative Catherine had anticipated. Ryan as the hard-working husband, stressed by business setbacks, genuinely remorseful about a single incident that had been blown out of proportion. Lisa as emotionally unstable, jealous, vindictive after discovering his relationship with Stephanie. The insurance policy as simple financial planning for a couple whose lifestyle required protection. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case isn't about a pattern of abuse," Bennett insisted, his voice carrying the smooth authority of privilege and practice. It's about a marriage that had problems, a regrettable loss of control on one occasion, and a vengeful response aided and abetted by Mrs. Peterson's mother, a divorce attorney with a professional bias toward seeing abuse where there are merely marital difficulties. Catherine felt Lisa tense beside her at the character assassination, but her daughter maintained the composed expression they had practiced, neutral, attentive, neither confrontational nor cowed. The jury would be watching her reactions throughout the trial, and showing the right balance of emotion and control was itself a performative burden victims uniquely bore. The prosecution's case began with the medical evidence. Dr. Elena Martinez took the stand first, presenting the clinical documentation of Lisa's injuries with professional detachment that somehow made their brutality more stark. The pattern of bruising on Mrs. Peterson's torso is consistent with being kicked while on the ground. Dr. Martinez testified, gesturing toward anatomical diagrams displayed on a screen for the jury. The fractured ribs on her left side show the application of significant force, not accidental contact. Bennett's cross-examination focused on alternative explanations. Could a fall downstairs produce similar injuries? Could previous medical conditions have predisposed Lisa to bone fractures? Could her anti-anxiety medication have affected her balance or perception? Each suggestion subtly implying that Lisa was either lying or confused about the source of her injuries. Based on my 15 years of emergency medicine experience and specific training in domestic violence injuries, Dr. Martinez countered, the constellation of injuries I observed is consistent with intentional assault and inconsistent with accidental falling. The prosecution methodically built their foundation, establishing the physical injuries beyond reasonable doubt before moving to the psychological context. Dr. Alicia Williams followed, explaining trauma bonding, coercive control, and the complex reasons victims remain in abusive relationships. The question, why didn't she just leave, fundamentally misunderstands the dynamics of abuse, Dr. Williams explained. By the time physical violence begins, the victim has typically already been subjected to months or years of psychological conditioning, financial restriction, and social isolation that make leaving seem impossible. Bennett's cross-examination was particularly aggressive, with Dr. Williams attempting to paint her as an ideologue rather than an objective expert. Isn't it convenient that your theory essentially means we should always believe the accuser regardless of evidence, that any defense offered by the accused is simply reframed as typical abuser behavior? Dr. Williams remained unruffled. My testimony isn't about belief, but understanding context. The dynamics I've described are documented across thousands of case studies and peer-reviewed research. They explain observed patterns, not individual guilt or innocence. By mid-afternoon, the prosecution called Detective Sofia Ramirez, who walked the jury through the investigation, the initial report from the hospital, the documented history of suspicious injuries over 2 years, the violation of the protective order, the threatening texts. When court adjourned for the day, Catherine guided Lisa through the back exit, both of them silent until they reached the privacy of their car. Only then did Lisa's careful composure crumble, her hands shaking as she fastened her seatbelt. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom," she whispered. Sitting there feeling him staring at me, watching Bennett twist everything to make me sound crazy. "You don't have to look at him," Catherine reminded her. "When you're on the stand tomorrow, focus on Rodriguez or on me. Ryan only has power if you give it to him." Lisa's testimony began the following morning. Catherine watched from the front row as her daughter took the oath, her voice steady despite the visible tension in her shoulders. Rodriguez led her gently through the account of her relationship with Ryan, the charming beginning, the gradual isolation, the escalating control, the first incidents of physical abuse. "It started with criticism," Lisa explained. "My clothes, my friends, how I spent money, then monitoring my phone, my email, my schedule. If I was 5 minutes late coming home from work, there would be an interrogation. Then came the pushing, the grabbing my arm so hard it left bruises. And finally the hitting." She recounted the previous accidents, the sprained wrist, the bruised ribs, the concussion, and how Ryan had manipulated medical personnel by playing the concerned husband. The psychological warfare of alternating violence with periods of intense remorse and affection, creating a cycle that kept her perpetually off balance and hopeful that the real Ryan would return permanently. When she described the final incident, her voice remained level, but tears slipped down her cheeks. The confrontation with Stephanie Ryan's rage, the brutal beating that followed her desperate drive to her mother's house. Throughout her testimony, she never once looked directly at Ryan, keeping her gaze fixed on either Rodriguez or the middle distance of the courtroom wall. Bennett's cross-examination was as ruthless as Catherine had prepared Lisa to expect, yet still jarring to witness as a mother. "Mrs. Peterson, isn't it true that you've struggled with jealousy throughout your marriage?" Bennett began, his tone suggesting sympathetic understanding while his questions implied culpability. Lisa's chin lifted slightly. "I've struggled with my husband's infidelity and dishonesty, if that's what you're asking." "You've been treated for anxiety and depression, correct?" "Yes, like millions of Americans. And these conditions sometimes cause you to misinterpret situations to see malice where none exists. They sometimes cause me to doubt myself when I should trust my instincts," Lisa countered. "Like when I found bruises on my body, but convinced myself they must have come from bumping into furniture." Bennett shifted tactics, focusing on instances where Lisa had stayed with Ryan after abuse implying consent or exaggeration. "If you were truly terrified of your husband, why did you go on vacation with him to the Bahamas just 2 weeks after what you claim was a violent assault?" "Because he convinced me the first incident was an accident. Because he cried and promised it would never happen again. Because I loved him and wanted to believe him." Lisa's voice carried both sadness and clarity. "Because that's how abuse works. It's not continuous terror. There are good periods that keep you hoping, that make you doubt your own experiences." For 3 hours, Bennett attempted to undermine Lisa's credibility, yet she held firm to her account. When he finally concluded, Rodriguez had only one redirect question. "Mrs. Peterson, with everything you know now, why did you finally leave?" Lisa paused, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom before settling on her mother's face. "Because I finally understood that staying wouldn't protect me, that no amount of compliance or perfection would stop the violence, that I deserved better than living in fear in my own home." The afternoon brought Stephanie Cole to the stand, visibly nervous but composed. She confirmed the affair with Ryan, his lies about the state of his marriage, and most critically what she had witnessed the night of the assault. "I heard sounds of someone being hit and Lisa crying, begging him to stop," she testified. "When Ryan returned, he acted like nothing had happened. He suggested we go to a hotel." Bennett's cross-examination hammered on Stephanie's credibility as the other woman, and suggested she was testifying out of spite after Ryan ended their relationship. "Isn't it convenient that you've suddenly developed a conscience about Mrs. Peterson's welfare after happily carrying on an affair with her husband for 8 months? Stephanie flushed but didn't waver. "There's nothing convenient about any of this. I'm risking my career testifying against a powerful man in my industry. But I can't unsee what I saw or unhear what I heard." The prosecution's next witness delivered the surprise Catherine had been strategically withholding. Heather Johnston took the stand, her presence visibly shocking Ryan, whose composed facade cracked for the first time as he leaned urgently toward Bennett, whispering with obvious agitation. Heather, now a marketing executive in Chicago, detailed her 2-year relationship with Ryan from 2012 to 2014, a relationship that followed the same pattern of isolation control and escalating violence that Lisa had experienced. "The final incident left me with a broken arm and 2 cracked ribs," Heather testified. "I filed charges initially, but then—" "Objection." Bennett was on his feet. "Your Honor, this witness is bound by a non-disclosure agreement regarding any settlement with my client." Judge Morrison looked to Heather. "Ms. Johnston, are you aware that testifying may place you in violation of a legally binding agreement?" Heather straightened her shoulders. "I am, Your Honor. I've consulted with my own attorney and am prepared for those consequences. Some things are more important than money." The judge considered briefly. "The objection is overruled. The witness may continue. The court finds that NDAs shielding criminal behavior are against public policy." Heather went on to describe how Ryan had paid her $200,000 to withdraw the charges and sign an NDA using the same playbook he had attempted with Lisa. Her testimony established the critical pattern, not a one-time loss of control, but a calculated cycle repeated with multiple women. Bennett's cross-examination was particularly aggressive, accusing Heather of violating her contract for publicity or financial gain. "Isn't it true that you approached the prosecution looking for a payout larger than your original settlement?" "I approached them because I saw Lisa Peterson on the news and recognized the same haunted look I used to see in my own mirror," Heather replied. "I've spent 6 years looking over my shoulder, afraid of what Ryan would do if I spoke up. I'm done being afraid." By day's end, Catherine could see the jury's perception shifting. The initial skepticism some had shown during opening statements had transformed into focused attention, with several jurors taking extensive notes during the pattern evidence. The prosecution's case continued with financial evidence: the forensic accountant who traced Ryan's business losses, the insurance agent who testified about the life policy purchased 6 months earlier, the mortgage broker who confirmed Ryan had forged Lisa's signature on a second mortgage. The picture that emerges is of a man in financial freefall, the accountant testified. Mr. Peterson had accumulated over $400,000 in high-interest debt to non-traditional lenders, while simultaneously presenting an image of success to clients and associates. Marcus Webb provided the connection between financial desperation and violence, testifying about Ryan's meetings with loan shark Vincent Russo. Based on my surveillance, Mr. Peterson appeared to be under significant pressure from Russo, with increasing tension and frequency of meetings in the weeks leading up to the assault. The defense began its case on the 4th day, calling character witnesses from Ryan's business circle's associates who described him as even-tempered, generous, and devoted to Lisa. Each admitted under cross-examination that they had never witnessed the couple's private interactions at home. Ryan's mother testified tearfully about her son's gentle nature and difficult childhood, attempting to humanize him for the jury. Rodriguez's cross-examination was respectfully brief but pointed. Mrs. Peterson, when was the last time you lived with your son or observed his daily behavior in his home? Well, not since he went to college, but a mother knows her child. So you haven't directly observed his day-to-day behavior as an adult for approximately 20 years. No, but no further questions, Your Honor. On the 5th day, Bennett called a surprise witness, Dr. Harold Freeman, a psychiatrist who had never treated Lisa, but who testified as an expert on false memory syndrome and suggestion-induced beliefs. He proposed that Lisa's mother, with her background in domestic violence cases, might have inadvertently influenced Lisa to reinterpret normal marital conflicts as abuse. When someone with authority suggests a narrative, Dr. Freeman explained, particularly to a person in a vulnerable emotional state, that narrative can become indistinguishable from actual memory in the person's mind. Rodriguez's cross-examination was surgical. Dr. Freeman, can false memory syndrome explain 3 fractured ribs? Well, no, but can suggestion-induced belief cause fingerprint-shaped bruises on someone's arms? The physical evidence is separate from the interpretation of a yes or no, doctor. Can suggestion cause physical trauma documented by medical professionals? No. No further questions. The climactic moment arrived when Ryan himself took the stand against Bennett's advice, but insistent on telling his side. Catherine had anticipated this: narcissistic abusers often believed they could charm or manipulate any audience, including a jury. Ryan presented himself as a dedicated husband struggling with business pressures who had made one terrible mistake during an argument. He admitted to hitting Lisa once, but claimed the rest of her injuries must have occurred when she fell. He portrayed himself as the victim of a vengeful wife and interfering mother-in-law determined to destroy his reputation and business. I loved Lisa, Ryan insisted, his voice catching in a performance of emotion. I still love her. I made a mistake, one I'll regret for the rest of my life, but I'm not the monster they're describing. Rodriguez's cross-examination began gently, almost conversationally, lulling Ryan into a false sense of security before systematically dismantling his narrative. Mr. Peterson, you've testified that you hit your wife once in a moment of lost control. Is that correct? Yes, and I'm deeply ashamed of that moment. Yet medical evidence shows injuries consistent with multiple impacts: a punch to the face, several kicks to the ribs. How do you explain that discrepancy? Like I said, she must have fallen after I hit her. I left the room so I didn't see. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. Let's talk about Heather Johnston. Was that also just one moment of lost control? Ryan's jaw tightened visibly. That was a completely different situation. Different how she also ended up with broken bones. She also reported a pattern of escalating control and violence. She also received an offer of $200,000 to keep quiet, the exact same amount you initially offered Lisa through your attorney. Coincidence. Ryan snapped, his composed facade cracking. And ancient history. Ancient history that repeats itself, Rodriguez observed. Let's discuss the life insurance policy you took out on Lisa 6 months ago. Why $750,000 specifically? Standard financial planning. Any responsible husband would do the same. Interesting, because that amount almost exactly matches your combined debt to Vincent Russo and the second mortgage you took out on your home using Lisa's forged signature. Ryan's expression darkened. I did not forge anything. Lisa signed those papers. Rodriguez produced the mortgage documents and Lisa's driver's license signature for comparison. The handwriting expert disagrees, Mr. Peterson. Just as the forensic accountant disagrees with your characterization of your business as successful when it was actually hemorrhaging money. As Rodriguez methodically connected the financial desperation, the insurance policy, and the escalating violence, Ryan's carefully maintained composure deteriorated. His answers became shorter, more defensive, his tone increasingly hostile. "You've painted yourself as a loving husband who made one mistake," Rodriguez continued. "Yet we have testimony from 2 women who experienced identical patterns of abuse. We have financial records showing mounting desperation. We have a life insurance policy that would solve those financial problems if something happened to Lisa. That's quite a coincidence, isn't it?" "You're twisting everything," Ryan hissed. "Lisa was never in any danger. Then why did you violate the protective order to confront her at her mother's house?" "Because she belongs with me. She's my wife." The words exploded from Ryan, echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom. "She had no right to embarrass me in front of my colleagues, to air our private business in public, to turn people against me." "No right," Rodriguez repeated softly. "No right to seek safety. No right to speak about what happened to her." "She's exaggerating what happened. She provoked me. If she had just—" Ryan stopped abruptly, realizing too late the damage his outburst had done. "If she had just what Mr. Peterson stayed silent, accepted the abuse, died conveniently so you could collect the insurance money." "Objection," Bennett shouted. "Counsel is badgering the witness." "Sustained." Judge Morrison ruled. "Mr. Rodriguez, confine yourself to questions." But the damage was done. The jury had witnessed Ryan's mask slip, completely revealing the entitlement and rage beneath the polished exterior. As he stepped down from the witness stand, his gaze locked briefly with Lisa's, for the first time during the trial, a look of pure hatred that several jurors visibly registered. Closing arguments came the following morning. Rodriguez methodically summarized the evidence, medical testimony, the pattern established across multiple victims, the financial motive, Ryan's own damning testimony. He reminded the jury that domestic violence thrived in privacy and denial, and that their verdict would send a message about whether wealth and social standing placed someone above accountability. "The question before you is not whether Ryan Peterson presents well in business settings or has friends who've never seen his private behavior," Rodriguez concluded. "The question is whether he committed the crimes charged: assault causing serious injury, domestic violence, and violating a protective order. The evidence leaves no reasonable doubt that he did exactly that as part of a calculated pattern of abuse that might well have ended in Lisa Peterson's death if she hadn't found the courage to leave." Bennett's closing attempted damage control, characterizing Ryan's outburst as the understandable frustration of an innocent man facing false accusations. He emphasized the he said, she said nature of domestic incidents and suggested Lisa's account had been influenced by her mother's professional bias toward seeing abuse. He questioned the credibility of both Stephanie and Heather as witnesses with personal grudges. "What happened in the Peterson home that night was regrettable," Bennett acknowledged. "But it was a single incident during a troubled time in their marriage, not the conspiracy the prosecution has painted. Ryan Peterson is not on trial for being a perfect husband, or for his business practices, or for a relationship that ended 6 years ago. He's on trial for specific charges that the evidence simply doesn't support beyond reasonable doubt." The jury deliberated for just over 4 hours, shorter than either Catherine or Rodriguez had anticipated, given the complexity of the case. When they filed back in, Catherine felt Lisa's hand grasp hers with almost painful intensity. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Morrison asked. The foreperson, a retired school administrator in her 60s, stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the count of felony domestic assault, how do you find we find the defendant guilty? On the count of felony assault causing serious injury, how do you find we find the defendant guilty? On the count of violating a protective order, how do you find we find the defendant guilty?" Lisa exhaled a shuddering breath, tears streaming silently down her face as the verdict was read. Across the courtroom, Ryan sat motionless, his expression frozen in disbelief that his charm and status had failed to shield him. Bennett immediately requested bail pending sentencing, which Judge Morrison denied. Given the defendant's previous violation of court orders and the serious nature of these convictions, the court finds Mr. Peterson presents both a flight risk and a danger to others. He will remain in custody until sentencing. As the bailiffs approached to take Ryan into custody, he suddenly lunged toward the prosecution table, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't over. You think this changes anything? I still own you. I'll always—" The bailiffs restrained him before he could reach Lisa, but the outburst removed any lingering doubt about the man behind the polished facade. Several jurors who had remained to watch the aftermath appeared visibly shaken by the display. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Catherine guided Lisa past them with a brief, "We're grateful for the jury's careful consideration of the evidence," before escorting her to their waiting car. They drove in silence for several minutes before Lisa finally spoke. "It's really over, isn't it?" "The criminal case is," Catherine confirmed. "Sentencing is still ahead and we'll proceed with the divorce, but the hardest part is behind you." "I don't feel how I expected to feel," Lisa admitted, gazing out the window at the early spring buds on the trees lining the street. "I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated or at least relieved, but I just feel empty." "That's normal," Catherine assured her. "Your body and mind have been in survival mode for so long. Now that the immediate threat is past, you're experiencing the emotional equivalent of muscle fatigue after a marathon." 2 weeks later, they returned to court for Ryan's sentencing. The prosecution had requested the maximum 25 years. Bennett argued for leniency, suggesting 5 to 10 years with parole eligibility. Lisa delivered a victim impact statement that captured the attention of everyone in the courtroom. "The bruises healed within weeks," she told the court, her voice steady. "But the invisible injuries remain: the fear that startles me awake at night, the doubt that makes me question my own perceptions, the shame that shouldn't be mine, but somehow is anyway. These are the lasting legacy of abuse." She looked directly at Ryan for the first time. "I don't speak today out of vengeance. I speak so that the damage is acknowledged not just to me, but to Heather before me and to anyone who might have been next. I speak because silence protects abusers, not victims." Judge Morrison's sentencing statement was unequivocal. "Mr. Peterson, you systematically abused your wife for 2 years, culminating in an assault that could have killed her. You showed no remorse, violated a protective order, and attempted to manipulate the court through false testimony. Your privilege and position make your actions more egregious, not less, as you use those advantages to enable and conceal your crimes." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "I sentence you to 20 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for the first 10 years. You will complete a mandatory domestic violence intervention program. You will have no contact whatsoever with Lisa Peterson or Catherine Wilson for the remainder of your life." As the bailiffs led Ryan away, he maintained rigid composure, refusing to look back at the courtroom or acknowledge the sentence. The mask had returned too late to save him, but still his instinctive shield against vulnerability. 1 year later, Catherine stood in the doorway of Lisa's classroom, watching her daughter lead a group of third graders through a math lesson. Lisa moved with an ease and confidence that had been absent during the dark months of the trial and its aftermath. Her hair was longer now, pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she smiled genuinely as her students worked through the problems she'd assigned. After class, they met for lunch at a cafe near the school. Over sandwiches and iced tea, Lisa shared news of her life, her successful return to teaching her ongoing therapy with Dr. Williams, her tentative steps toward rebuilding a social life that had been decimated during her years with Ryan. "I've started dating someone," she revealed, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "His name is David. He teaches science at my school. We've been seeing each other for about 3 months. Catherine kept her expression neutral, though her heart quickened with both hope and apprehension. "How is that going?" "Different. Good different. He's patient with me. He understands I have a trust issues, that certain things still trigger panic responses. When I flinch if someone moves too quickly, he doesn't take it personally. He just gives me space until I feel safe again." "I'm glad," Catherine said, meaning it with her whole heart. "You deserve that kind of understanding." "I'm in therapy twice a week now," Lisa continued. "Dr. Williams says I'm making good progress. I still have nightmares sometimes, but they're becoming less frequent." "Healing takes time," Catherine reminded her gently. "You experience trauma. Be patient with yourself." "I am." Lisa reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "And Mom, thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for not letting him win. I don't know if I ever properly thanked you for that." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Lisa, you're my daughter. I would fight heaven and hell for you. I always will." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, just being together in the sunlit cafe, surrounded by the ordinary rhythm of everyday life that had once seemed impossibly distant. "Ryan sent me a letter last month," Lisa said quietly. "From prison. He said he was sorry that he'd found God, that he hoped I could forgive him someday." "How did that make you feel?" "I threw it away," Lisa said simply. I don't need his apology. I don't need his forgiveness. I needed justice and I got it. That's enough. As Catherine drove home that evening, she reflected on the journey they'd traveled. From that terrible night when Lisa had appeared at her doorstep, broken and terrified, to today, seeing her laugh with her students, planning a future without fear shadowing every decision. Catherine had spent 30 years helping women escape abuse. She'd won hundreds of cases, put dozens of abusers behind bars, rebuilt countless shattered lives. But saving her own daughter, that had been the most important case of her career. And they'd won not just in court, though that victory had been essential. They'd won because Lisa was free now, because she was healing, because she was learning to trust again, to hope again, to live again. The personal cost had been substantial. Catherine's law practice had suffered during the months she'd focused almost exclusively on Lisa's case. She'd lost clients, worked endless unpaid hours, depleted savings to cover expenses. But sitting across from Lisa today, seeing the spark returning to her daughter's eyes, Catherine knew she would make the same choice 1,000 times over. The experience had also crystallized something Catherine had felt increasingly over recent years, a growing frustration with the legal system's inadequacies when it came to protecting abuse victims. The burden of proof, the traumatic nature of testimony, the financial barriers to quality representation, the bias that still permeated courtrooms, all combined to create a justice gap that allowed too many abusers to escape accountability. 2 months after Ryan's sentencing, Catherine had approached Michael with an idea that had been forming since those dark days of building Lisa's case. I want to start a non-profit legal clinic for domestic violence survivors, she'd proposed. Free representation, trauma-informed practices, comprehensive support services. Not just legal help, but the full spectrum of what victims need to truly escape and rebuild. Michael hadn't hesitated. Count me in. We'll call it the Wilson Project. Now, a year later, the Wilson Project operated from a modest office in downtown Arlington with 3 full-time attorneys and a network of pro bono partners. Catherine had transitioned from private practice to serving as the nonprofit's executive director, taking a significant pay cut, but finding renewed purpose in the work. They'd already helped 57 women navigate the legal system, secure protective orders, file for divorce, and access the resources needed to start over. Lisa had even begun speaking at their outreach events, sharing her story to help others recognize the warning signs she'd missed. As Catherine pulled into her driveway, her phone chimed with a text from Michael. Judge granted emergency custody order for the Martinez case. Client and children safely relocated. Another win. Another family freed from violence. Another cycle broken before it claimed the next generation. Small victories in a battle that sometimes seemed endless, but victories nonetheless. Catherine glanced at the framed photograph on her entry table, Lisa at her college graduation, flanked by her proud parents, her future still an unwritten page full of promise. That future had taken an unimaginable detour through darkness, but wasn't lost after all. Different, perhaps marked by scars, both visible and hidden, but still unfolding with possibilities. The wisdom Catherine had gained through decades of legal work had taken on new depth through personal experience. Justice wasn't just a concept enshrined in courtrooms and legal textbooks. It wasn't even primarily about punishment, though accountability mattered. At its heart, justice was about restoration, giving back what had been taken, whether that was safety voice or the fundamental right to determine one's own path forward. For Lisa, for Catherine herself, for every client who walked through the Wilson Project's doors, true justice began not with a verdict, but with the first step toward reclaiming what abuse had stolen dignity, agency, hope. The legal system, for all its flaws, was just one tool in that journey. The real work happened in quiet moments of healing and tentative steps toward trust in the gradual reclamation of joy. As spring bloomed outside her window, Catherine made a silent promise to the women whose cases filled her desk, whose stories echoed Lisa's in ways both obvious and subtle. The promise she'd made to her daughter that terrible night now extended to all who would follow. You are not alone. Your truth matters. And no one, no matter how wealthy, how powerful, how respected, stands above accountability. The work would never truly be finished. But for tonight, Catherine allowed herself to rest in the knowledge that her daughter was safe, healing, moving forward. That the man who had nearly destroyed her would harm no one else for many years to come. That the skills Catherine had spent a lifetime honing had made a difference when it mattered most. Sometimes justice won. Not always. Not easily. But sometimes, and that possibility made every battle worth fighting.